Well, welcome to Focus Today with John Mittendorf, who joins us. Good to see you again.
Well, it's a pleasure being here, Steve.
Yeah, it's nice to have you here. And John does a lot of research on his own and brings it to the table. This is the table right here on Focus Today. So he has brought it, and I see it has a picture of the pyramids, which I know you have talked about before with ancient technologies. You're kind of in this series with Perry that way. And we're looking at the Cheops Pyramid, which is, that's like the big kahuna, right? This is the one that people go into. I've been there myself.
Yeah, you've been there yourself.
And
exactly
you see it?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest ones. And you know what's fascinating about this is it's right outside of Cairo. I mean, our hotel, when we looked out, we could see just in the little mist, there were the pyramids, and the city has grown up almost right to it. So it's a great place to visit. I'm thinking with the Muslim Brotherhood, not the best time to go right now. Yeah, but that's why we have John here to take us there to see what we need to know about it.
Yeah, actually this series, Steve, we started it back in January, and it was based on a foundation. I don't want to forget this, that ancient technology, in other words, how smart the ancient people were, points right at the Bible. Adam and Eve were created smart. So should we be able to look back into history and see evidence of ancient technology? Yes, we should, and yes, we do. Pyramid's a classic example.
Especially since we still don't really know how it was built. I mean, it's such an amazing wonder of the world.
You know, it's interesting that the Giant Pyramid of Cheops, where you've been, it's the biggest pyramid of all the Egyptian pyramids. It's almost 500 feet high. That's a 50-story building.
Oh, it's huge.
Oh, yeah, you've been there. It's the most colossal building ever constructed by any civilization. And if we can bring up figure one, we'll show the people what it looks like. It's an amazing piece of architecture.
And we see the cap on the top. That used to be all the way down the side, so it was very smooth and everything. And I think over the years they kind of they took it and it was marble.
Succeeding civilizations, the Ottomans and the Romans and everything, because it was so precise, they stripped a lot of that off and they used that in their building construction. But they think that back in the day that was built, of course, it's the only one of the 7 wonders of the world that's still left. That was white limestone, polished limestone on the outside of the pyramid. They think the top cap of the pyramid, the capstone, was sheathed in gold. And they think when the sun rose and set and when the rays reflected off of the pyramid, you could have seen it from the moon. It was that that grandiose, so to speak. But back to the ancient technology, that modern technology and, of course, evolution says, oh, no, you know, man wasn't that smart, and, of course, we've gotten smart over the alleged thousands of years. But really, when you look at the pyramid, and particularly if I can have figure number 2, if you look at a lot of the magazines, and particularly evolutionary literature, and this is a classic example, this is the Penguin Atlas of World Civilizations. It specifically says, and I'm quoting, that the ancient Egyptians, 2560 BC, was a simple farming community that did not have the wheel or the pulley and used simple farming tools. If I can have figure 3, this is even a better description of it. Right here. And what they try to allude to the fact is the ancient Egyptians just had basically simple tools. If you watch the Nat Geo channel, you'll see these Egyptians with hammers and copper chisels beating on the granite, you know. And of course, when we look at the pyramid today, they were doing things that we cannot do today. In fact, there's a lot of evidence that they were using very sophisticated machinery, as I said, doing things that we cannot do today. So how do you line that up then with a simple farming community that did not have the wheel or the pulley? See, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up. So what I wanted to do is just briefly this morning, if we can finish, if not, we'll continue next month, is just talk about the pyramid, and I think the people will be amazed at some of the things that they were doing that points up to the fact that they were a lot smarter than we give them credit for, and smarter in some cases than we are today.
Yeah, and I've had that theory too. I think that we have this arrogance of the now concept, that because we're alive now, we're so much more sophisticated and knowledgeable. Hey, we've got the internet, you know, than these people are. And I think you're exactly right on that. I mean, there's still a lot of mysteries we don't know about, and you'd think if we were that smart, we would.
Exactly. Let me talk just for a few minutes. And by the way, the notes, Steve, I've got here, these are far in more detail than the notes that we handed out last month. And when I got back into the pyramids for today's program, this thing wound up to be 22 pages long.
Wow.
And of course, with all the graphics and everything, if people want to copy these notes, it's hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com.
Okay.
And this is on specifically the ancient Pyramid of Cheops, or Khufu, in Egypt, which is about 2500 BC. Let's talk about technology just for a second. And I know you're familiar with a lot of stuff because you've been there. 2.3 million gigantic blocks cut to within the nearest thousandths of an inch.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Let me repeat that. The nearest thousandths of an inch. And I think when you went up the Grand Gallery, we'll talk about that in a minute, that you said that you cannot hardly see the joints of the blocks in the pyramid, correct?
And I made a notation of that because you put your fingernail and it's almost just a line between them. I mean, you can't even stick your fingernail in there because it is so incredibly accurate.
And so precise.
And it all was that way.
Exactly.
Entirely.
A couple other things. 100,000 casing stones, so those are the stones that were the outside of the pyramid that were the polished white, and their precision is equal to modern machine shops, but not on modern building sites today. And this is a fascinating part, Steve. The meridian running through the pyramid divides perfectly the continents and the oceans into two equal halves. The center line of the pyramid lies at the center of gravity of the continents. The faces north, south, east, west are perfectly aligned north, south, east, west. Well, how do they do that? How do you take the center of the landmass of the Earth and position a 50-story building perfectly in the center of the landmass? How do you put a 50-story building and perfectly divide the continents of the Earth when you're a simple farming community?
Yeah, right.
It's very difficult
and on
to do.
such a grand scale too, you know, because it's not as if you can take it and tweak it after you're done.
Yeah.
You know, it's there.
It's on such a grand scale. If I can have the next picture, which would be picture 4, this is a picture of the capstones, what's called the capstones on the outside of the pyramid. As we just talked about, those were polished white. And so the pyramid was basically a brilliant white with a gold capstone on the top of the pyramid. And as I previously mentioned, they figured that when the sun reflected off of that you could have seen that from the moon. You know, it's amazing. And you think, well, it would take something big to do that. Well, the pyramid contains more stone than used in all the churches, cathedrals, and chapels built in England since the time of Christ. You could also build 30 Empire State Buildings with it. You could also build a wall 3 feet wide, 3 feet high and 1 feet wide across the United States and back again. That's how many stones we're talking about in this pyramid. And
not
so,
exactly the wall that Donald Trump wants to build along the border, but it's significant.
Exactly right. The last thing in technology, the notes have a lot more things about the pyramid. I don't want to cover a lot of that today. But the base of the pyramid covers 13 acres. And this is 4,500 years later, and today is level to within 7/8 of an inch.
That's the whole thing. It hasn't cracked or anything, and it's not listing. It's not like the Tower of Pisa, you know.
Right, yeah. Now, you might want to ask, okay, here we are, 2016. How do we know that the stones were cut to 1,000th of an inch? How do we know that the base is level to within 7/8 of an inch, and blah, blah, blah? And basically, it's metrology, the science of measurement. We didn't know that until we had GPS, lasers, and the rest of it today. So that brings up the question, okay, 4,500 years ago, how did they do that?
How'd they do it?
See? They had to have some type of a measurement system that was fully capable of duplicating what we duplicate today, what we do today. When you start to get your mind around this, you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, these people, in some cases, were just as smart or as brilliant as we are, and maybe even a little bit smarter once we get into this a little bit more.
No, I think you're right, because we haven't figured it out. Yeah.
Exactly right. If I can have, how much time do we have before the break?
We've got about 3 minutes.
About 3 minutes?
Yeah.
Let's bring up figure 5, and let's take a look at the inside of the pyramid, and basically, let's just talk about, before we go to break, let me get the picture right here. And what the picture is looking at is the inside of the pyramid, and of course, there's 2 things that we know about the pyramid. Number 1, it was not a funerary device. It was never built to bury a pharaoh in. All pharaohs today are found in the Valley of the Kings. In fact, the U.S. Egyptologist, Dr. Mark Lanier, said we have never found a pharaoh in any pyramid in Egypt. There's over 108 pyramids. And the other thing that we know about the pyramid is it is the interior design of the pyramid far exceeds what you would do for a simple funerary device. So, just real quick, let me go ahead and label for the people that are watching this that back in 820, a caliph, Al-Ma'mun, bore into the side of the pyramid, and they think he was probably a tomb robber. But at any rate, when he bore in, that's A, he bore into and hit one of the passageways of the pyramid, which is called the descending chamber, and that's B on the graphic. And that goes down 350 feet into bedrock, down to D, which is called a subterranean chamber, which they don't really know why that was there.
And it's actually below the pyramid.
350 feet into bedrock, and by the way, that entire chamber only varies 1/4 of an inch for 350 feet into bedrock. I mean, you could just spend all day just talking about the precision. Okay, then you have a well shaft, which is E, which goes up through a grotto, which is a small room, which is the base of the pyramid. They don't know what that's for, and that goes up to the ground gallery. But let me go back to the normal entrance to the pyramid, which used to be B, which used to have a 20-ton stone that rotated, that was so precise you could not tell where it was on the outside of the pyramid. You only knew where it was if you were familiar with the inside of the pyramid. And you could push that open and close with one finger. 20-ton block. Anyway, let's go back to that drawing again. So then we have the normal entrance, which was B, which went down to what's called the ascending chamber, which ascended up through the pyramid, which is G. And that went to the base of the grand gallery, which you've been in before.
Yeah, and it gets right into the center of the pyramid. It's an amazing thing.
Exactly right. How big was that ascending chamber when you went up the ascending chamber?
As I recall, we went up a side of it because there was kind of an open shaft area.
Okay.
So I don't know, I think it was a walkway that went up, and it looked as if that's where stones had been slid up or down, maybe down the last time. So it was kind of a larger area. You know, it was a smaller area that went into a bigger location. I would guess it was 20 by 20, something, or 15 by 15.
That's
maybe.
Probably the Grand Gallery. Why don't we do the Grand Gallery real quick, and then we'll take a break.
All
If we
right.
can go back to that drawing. The Grand Gallery is probably one of the most interesting passages in the pyramid. It's 29 feet high and about 7 feet wide. And if I can go to the next drawing, this is an amazing picture of the Grand Gallery, and you've been up that probably, right? And what's interesting about this, Steve, is it's made out of red granite, not limestone, and if you look very, very closely at the shelf on either side of the walkway, you'll see there are slots in the shelf. There's 27 pairs of slots, you know, 2 on either side as you go up. And then if you go up 2 blocks above each slot, there is another groove or a slot above each slot. And of course, the question comes up, why did they have the grooves in the slots in the Grand Gallery?
Right.
If we can go back to the picture again, at the top of the Grand Gallery, and I tried to brighten it as much as possible, it's what's called a ratchet-style ceiling. In other words, there's tiles. They're on a 45-degree angle, and all the tiles are pointed towards the top of the Grand Gallery. As the Grand Gallery goes towards the top, it starts to narrow down, kind of like a funnel, before it goes into what's called the antechamber. So why don't we take a break, and we come back, we'll talk about the antechamber and the
you're going to leave us stuck inside the pyramid. But that's okay, we will
just
get
temporarily. Temporarily.
John Mittendorf on Focus today. Stay tuned. More on the mysteries of the pyramids coming up.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today. John Mittendorf joins us as we are talking about the ancient technologies that in many ways were far more advanced than what we have right now, because we couldn't do what they have done. And we've only been able to measure what they have done, for example, with the pyramids just in the last few years.
With our precise equipment.
That's right.
GPS as a good example.
Now, John took us into the center of the pyramid. That's where we are now, on our way up to the main area. We're in the what is that?
That's the Grand Gallery.
The Grand Gallery.
Yeah, but if we can bring up figure number 7, this is probably the most interesting part of the pyramid, and it's called the King's Chamber. And for the people that are watching, you can see the Grand Gallery coming up from the right, and then it levels off and it goes into what's called the antechamber, and you'll see there are 3 stones. Those 3 stones can be moved up or down by ropes attached to wooden rollers. Of course, they've been removed now. But those stones were able to be adjusted up and down within the pyramid for a reason that we'll get into here after a little bit. Okay, then once we go through the antechamber, if we can bring the picture back up again, and we'll leave it up for a couple of minutes. Then we go into the antechamber. Now, there's a couple of interesting things, Steve, that I want you to look at. you'll notice that you have like an A-frame on top of the what's called the King's Chamber complex, and you have limestones that go down from that, but the darker stones that are in the middle of that are completely suspended or separate from the limestone of the pyramid. You with me on that one?
Yeah, sure.
Now,
kind of freestanding in a way, yeah.
It's freestanding, exactly. And what the Egyptians did was they made the pyramid out of limestone, but the King's Chamber complex is made out of red granite that has been shipped in from Aswan 500 miles away for a specific reason. And what you have is, if we can go back to the drawing, is you have 5 rows of beams that weigh up to 70 tons each, and there's 43 of them. And you'll notice the top of the beams have kind of a rough appearance, and it's obvious that each beam has been hand carved, and this is what they think today because of sonic tests done by NASA. They're hand carved to resonate at 438 cycles per second, which is the frequency, basic frequency of the Earth. Okay. Now, what's also interesting is if you look at the King's Chamber, it is suspended on what's called an egg crate underneath the block. So in other words, the entire King's Chamber is freestanding within the pyramid, and it's capable of resonating at a resonant frequency. If it was a part of the limestone inside the pyramid, it couldn't. But it was specifically designed to be separate and big. There's thousands of tons of red granite in the pyramid specifically that are separated from the pyramid. Why would you do that? See?
Yeah. And
the reason why it's felt they did that, if I can have figure 7A, it's called a piezoelectric effect, that if you take red granite, it has a 55% percentage of quartz crystal. Quartz crystal is capable of transferring mechanical vibrations into electricity. It's called a piezoelectric effect.
Sure, okay.
If you go back to the old cat's whisker on the crystal and the old radios, 80, 90 years ago, that's basically how that worked. Now, let's go to the next figure, which is figure 8. We're moving along here fairly quickly. Now, you've been here, Steve. This is the inside of the King's Chamber, and that's what's called the sarcophagus. That's what people think, well, if they were going to put a pharaoh inside the pyramid, that would have been his coffer. But the problem is they never did, and they've never found any pharaoh inside any pyramid.
And it's fairly small, too. It's not real big.
It's fairly small, but when that was hand-carved, and I'll talk about that in a second, that was a 70-ton piece of red granite or pink granite. Okay? The side of the sarcophagus is broken off, and they feel that was done hundreds and hundreds of years ago from tomb robbers trying to get into it, and of course the top is long gone. But here's the interesting part, Steve. Now I want you to tighten your seatbelt on this one.
All right. John's coming up, I think, with his reason for all of this.
No, but we're just going to, I think, solidify how smart the Egyptians were.
Okay.
That was a 70-ton solid piece of block. How did they hollow out the inside?
Well, I have a lot of questions. That's one of them.
Okay.
Sure.
We're going to talk about how they did it. Because modern quarries in the United States, precision quarries, are asked how would they do it, and this is how they would do it. They were incapable of doing it the way the Egyptians did it, which I'll talk about in a second. What they would do is they would make you 5 sides, the 4 sides, and then the bottom, which is your 5th.
Sure.
They would ship it to the job site and bolt it together. Here you go. That's not what the Egyptians did. They took a solid piece of granite and they used 18-inch tube drills. And if I can have the next picture brought up, this will explain that. That's the top of the sarcophagus. And what they do is they take an 18-inch tube drill. A tube drill is 18 inches, and of course it's hollow in the center, so when you drill down, you're drilling basically a circumference hole that goes down 18 inches, and the center of it is left, and that's called the core.
All right.
Are you with me on that?
Yeah.
And if we go back to the picture, you'll notice they drill all of the holes in there, and then what they do is they come back in and they break off all of the cores and the webs which are left in between the drill spots, and then the inside of the box is machined. Let me repeat that.
It was smooth, yeah.
Well, not only is it smooth, it's smooth perfectly to where you can take a machinist square, which is perfectly smooth, put it up against the side any place that you want, put a flashlight on one side, and a light will not shine through. It's perfectly smooth. Sides, bottom. And by the way, the use of tube drills that we just talked about here is called trepanning, T-R-E-P-A-N-N-I-N-G.
Okay.
Okay, now, this is where you've got to tighten your seatbelts just for a minute. You say, well, how could they do that? Well, not only did they do that, they know if I can have picture 10 brought up, and this is going to qualify what I'm going to say. If you look at that, that is one of the cores, and there's hundreds of them outside the pyramid. It's called the pyramid junkyard. They took the old stone and this stuff.
Okay.
They just threw it out in the junkyard.
Sure.
That is one of the many cores that is outside the pyramid. If you look at it, it has grooves in it. As the drill went down into the granite, and by the way, the only thing harder than granite is diamond.
Okay.
As it went down, you would leave the grooves on the outside of the core. By measuring the distance between each groove, they can tell what the feed rate, how fast the drill went into the granite.
Oh.
Okay?
Yeah.
Are you ready for this one? The feed rate of modern drills is 0.0002 inch per revolution. The feed rate of the Egyptian drills was 0.10 inch. In other words, the Egyptians' tube drills were 500 times faster.
A lot faster. Wow.
500 times faster than what we use today. Now, if you can wrap your mind around that, you say, okay, they had some type of a machinery that, and by the way, today, machinists will say the only type of machine that meets that qualification is ultrasonic machining. If you can wrap your mind around that, then you have to wrap your mind around what type of a power supply do they have to run that type of machinery.
Let alone the tools.
And the second question is, okay, John and Steve, where's the machinery today? Well, see, we don't know. I mean, everything is gone. The only thing left is the red granite stone from the pyramid that's still there, see. So the bottom line is they were using a technology far, far superior, 500 times faster than what we use today. Plus, they were doing things that when they went to modern quarries in the United States, they go, they can't do that because we can't do that.
Yeah,
but not only were they doing it, they were doing it on a mass basis. Because the sarcophagus and the pyramid, that's not the only one that they have found. I mean, there's lots of other ones that they found.
And so what do you think the sarcophagus, that we call it, was used for?
You know, I'm so glad that you asked me that.
Because we've only got about a minute.
Okay. Okay, with that, Steve, let me bring up the next picture right here, back to the pyramid. There's one thing we haven't covered yet. And that if you look at the king's chamber and you look at the queen's chamber, which is the smaller room down below that. Did you go to the queen's chamber when you were there? Okay. You'll notice that there are shafts that run from the chambers to the top of the pyramid. And out of the queen's chamber, there are shafts that run, but they stop 20 feet short from the outside of the pyramid.
Okay.
If I can have the last picture that's brought up, this one right here. The lower shafts that go out of the queen's chamber that stop just prior to the outside of the pyramid, in 1993, a special robot was built by an engineer called Gattenbrink, and this is called Gattenbrink's door. Each of the shafts that go out of the queen's chamber that stop short of the pyramid outside have one of these doors in it with copper fittings that are suspended in a tar-like insulative substance in the block.
Okay.
Why is that there?
Tell us.
We'll talk about it when we come back from the break.
Well, we'll be done.
Oh, we will.
We will. You're going to tell us next time you're here?
We might have to put this all together in April and talk about how this works.
It's a cliffhanger, I tell you. Okay, go, give the website again where they can go get more information.
That is hispeoplerejoice@gmail.com. And you know the reason why this takes a little bit, Steve, is because you just can't take a part of it and say, yeah, that's what they did. Once you understand all of the parts of this, then you start to understand what they were capable of and how that points directly at the Bible and technology.
Go to his website and request this. Is that how you do it?
The notes for today, they'll be complete with all of these graphics, be self-explanatory, and then we'll finish this up next month.
All right. John Mittendorf with us. Thanks for being with us on Focus today. Thank you for joining us as well, and see you next time.